Sade Carleena Robinson was just 19 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. A young woman with dreams of a brighter future, loved by her family and admired by her friends. She worked hard, balancing 2 jobs while pursuing a degree in criminal justice. Her goal: to graduate and join the US Air Force, following in the footsteps of her grandfather and uncle. But in April of 2024, everything changed. Sade disappeared. What began as a regular day ended in fear and heartbreak for her family. Her car was discovered abandoned and on fire. Hours later, a severed human leg was found near a park in Milwaukee. These events weren't just shocking, they were devastating. For Sade's family, her friends, and the community that knew her, life would never be the same. This wasn't just another news story. It was a tragedy that shook everyone it touched. Today, we're talking about Sade Carleena Robinson, a life full of promise, interrupted in the most unimaginable way. If you're new to this channel, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter. And if you believe this story deserves to be heard, give this video a like and share it with others. Now, let's honor Sade's memory by understanding her story, a story of love, loss, and the pursuit of justice. Sade Carleena Robinson was born on May 10, 2004, in Vicksburg, Mississippi. From the very start, her family knew she was something special. Her parents, Sheena and Carlos, loved her deeply, but life wasn't always easy. When Sade was just 2 years old, her parents separated. Her mother moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, while her father eventually settled in Florida. Despite the distance, her family did everything they could to ensure Sade and her younger sister Adriana grew up surrounded by love. Sade spent her childhood traveling between 2 worlds, Milwaukee and Florida. It wasn't always seamless, but she adapted, carrying a sense of responsibility and warmth wherever she went. She was the kind of big sister who went out of her way to support Adriana, even helping her secure a job at the Wisconsin club where Sade worked as a hostess. Her bond with her sister was one of love, guidance, and unwavering support. In her teenage years, Sade attended Ida S. Baker High School in Florida. She wasn't just a student, she was a standout. Her determination and focus allowed her to graduate early, a testament to her drive and ambition. While many young people her age were still figuring out their next steps, Sade already had a plan. She was determined to build a future for herself and began looking for job opportunities and college programs. By the time she returned to Milwaukee, she had enrolled at Milwaukee Area Technical College, pursuing an associate degree in criminal justice. Sade's dream was to graduate and join the US Air Force, following in the footsteps of her grandfather, a retired Navy veteran, and her uncle, who served in the Army. Her family couldn't have been prouder of her drive and resilience. Sade wasn't just about academics. She was a hard worker in every sense of the word. Balancing 2 jobs at just 19 years old, she worked tirelessly at Pizza Shuttle, a restaurant where she'd been employed for 5 years, and at the Wisconsin club. She was known for her warm smile, infectious laugh, and the way she made everyone feel at ease. Her co-workers often described her as the heart of the team, a bright light in their day. But Sade wasn't all work and no play. She had a playful, confident side that made her loved by everyone around her. One of her favorite pastimes was cooking seafood with her grandmother, Linda. These moments were special, filled with laughter, conversation, and the simple joy of being together. Sade's grandmother described her as someone who brought warmth into every room she entered. Despite her busy schedule, Sade always made time for her family and friends. Whether it was sharing stories about her day or dreaming about her future, she had a way of making people feel important. She carried herself with grace and maturity beyond her years, but she never lost the playful spirit that made her unique. In the spring of 2024, Sade was just weeks away from graduating with a 3.5 GPA. Her family was preparing to celebrate this incredible milestone, and she was already talking about the next chapter, joining the Air Force and traveling the world. Her life was a beautiful blend of hard work, ambition, and love for the people around her. Sade wasn't just a young woman with a promising future. She was someone who made others smile, someone who left an impression wherever she went. Her story is one of hope and potential, a life that touched so many before it was tragically cut short. This was Sade Carleena Robinson, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a young woman full of dreams and endless possibilities. But this is what she was before everything changed. On Sunday, March 31st, 2024, Sade Carleena Robinson spent the day with her family. It was Easter, a time for togetherness and celebration. She joined her loved ones at her mother's house, where they shared a home-cooked meal and enjoyed each other's company well into the evening. For Sade, family was everything. This wasn't just another gathering. It was a moment to connect, to laugh, to simply be together. When the evening came to a close, Sade left to return to her apartment. She had work the next morning, and as always, she was prepared. The next day, April 1st, began just like any other. Sade's mother, Sheena, decided to video call her daughter, a morning ritual that spoke to the closeness of their bond. They chatted about the night before, about Sade's plans for the week, and even her excitement over getting a new haircut in the coming days. For Sheena, this was just another warm conversation with her daughter. She had no way of knowing it would be the last. That same morning, Sade left her apartment to head to work. Whether she planned to take public transportation or drive her car isn't clear, but we do know she left. A witness later reported seeing her walking along North Commerce Street, just about a mile from Pizza Shuttle, the restaurant where she worked. Sade never arrived for her shift. This was unlike her. Sade wasn't someone who missed work without a reason. She wasn't someone who left others guessing. If she was running late, she always called. That day, though, there was no call, no text, no explanation. Her manager, knowing this was out of character, immediately contacted Sade's mother. The concern grew quickly. Sheena tried calling her daughter repeatedly, but the calls went unanswered. Then came a text, an unusual request for $15. It wasn't something Sade would typically ask for. She was responsible with her money, often saving and even self-funding trips. This text only added to the growing sense that something wasn't right. By the end of the day, Sheena knew something was terribly wrong. She reported Sade missing to the Milwaukee Police Department, hoping for answers, for any sign of her daughter's safety. But the following day, April 2nd, brought discoveries no parent should ever have to face. In the early hours of the morning, Sade's car was found in an alleyway near West Lisbon Avenue and North 30th Street. It had been set on fire. The police notified Sheena about the burned vehicle, but at that moment, there was no confirmation of what this could mean for her daughter's case. As the day unfolded, the situation grew even darker. Later that afternoon, a man walking through Warnemont Park near Lake Michigan stumbled upon something horrifying: a severed human leg. He immediately called 911, and law enforcement swarmed the area. The leg appeared to belong to a young woman, with no signs of decomposition, suggesting it had been recently severed. At this point, the investigation into Sade's disappearance escalated. What had started as a missing persons case now seemed to be something far more tragic. For her family, these developments were devastating. They held on to hope, but the fear was impossible to ignore. Sade's co-workers were heartbroken. Her friend and colleague, Evelise Martinez, spoke to the media, describing Sade as full of joy and kindness. She was generous, always smiling, and made everyone around her feel appreciated, Evelise said. For those who knew her, the thought of Sade in danger was unbearable. The community came together, organizing searches, sharing her story, and offering support to her family. The police, too, intensified their efforts, determined to uncover the truth. The events of April 2nd left everyone with the same question. What happened to Sade Carleena Robinson? This was the beginning of an investigation that would reveal more than anyone was prepared for. A family, a community, and an entire city find themselves holding their breath, waiting for justice. When the Milwaukee Police Department began investigating Sade Robinson's disappearance, they faced an overwhelming mix of fear and urgency. The burned car, the severed leg, these discoveries pointed to something terrible. Still, there were no clear answers, only mounting questions. As the investigation unfolded, a name quickly came to their attention: Maxwell Anderson. Anderson, a 33-year-old Milwaukee resident, was someone who had been in contact with Sade in the days leading up to her disappearance. What started as a casual meeting turned into a series of troubling discoveries that placed him at the center of this case. Anderson had a history that made investigators take notice. His criminal record included charges for domestic violence, property damage, and disorderly conduct. In one incident, he attacked a stranger who had intervened during an argument Anderson was having with a woman. Despite these red flags, Anderson had managed to avoid significant jail time over the years. When police searched Anderson's home, they found bloodstains on the stairwell and on a comforter in his bedroom. This evidence raised immediate concerns, though it would take time to confirm whether the blood belonged to Sade. In the meantime, investigators began piecing together Anderson's movements around the time of her disappearance. Meanwhile, the search for Sade continued. Her family, friends, and even strangers in the community organized searches in parks, alleyways, and wooded areas. They refused to give up hope, even as more remains were discovered in the days following her car's discovery. One of those remains was a blanket found on train tracks not far from where Sade's car had been set on fire. Her family recognized it immediately. It belonged to her. For her loved ones, this was another devastating blow, but they held on to the possibility that finding these clues might lead to answers. Sade's co-workers at Pizza Shuttle joined the search efforts as well, struggling to process what had happened. Evelise Martinez, one of her closest colleagues, said, "You never think it will be someone you know. It's devastating. She was so full of life, always smiling, always making people feel good. This doesn't feel real." The emotional toll on Sade's family was immense. Her mother, Sheena, stayed in constant contact with investigators, desperate for updates. Her sister Adriana joined the search efforts, clinging to the hope that they might find Sade alive. For a family so close-knit, the uncertainty was unbearable. But the investigation was far from straightforward. DNA testing was needed to confirm the identity of the remains, and each test took precious time. While waiting for results, detectives worked tirelessly to connect the dots. Surveillance footage showed Sade's car leaving Anderson's home on the night of her disappearance. Later, a witness reported seeing a man matching Anderson's description setting the car on fire before fleeing on a city bus. These discoveries strengthened the case against Anderson, but the community's questions only grew louder. Why had someone with such a violent past been able to walk free? Could this tragedy have been prevented? The investigation wasn't just about solving a crime. It was about bringing peace to a grieving family and a shaken community. Each new piece of evidence brought both answers and more questions. The search for justice was just beginning, but for Sade's loved ones, every day without her felt like an eternity. The evidence was building, but the truth was far from clear. What happened to Sade Robinson, and why? The answers would be as heartbreaking as they were necessary. Maxwell Anderson quickly became the focus of the investigation. His connection to Sade and the troubling details of his past made it impossible to ignore him as a suspect. Anderson had a documented history of violent behavior. In 2014, He was charged with disorderly conduct after shoving a relative, smashing her phone, and fleeing the scene in her car, which he later crashed. Just a year later, he was arrested again, this time for another domestic altercation involving property damage and attempts to stop the victim from seeking help. In 2019, his violence extended beyond family disputes. He assaulted a man who tried to intervene in a public argument he was having with a woman. The attack left the victim injured, and while Anderson admitted guilt, his sentence consisted of probation, community service, and a restitution payment. Despite these repeated offenses, Anderson never faced significant jail time. For many in the community, this pattern raised serious concerns. Each charge and subsequent leniency seemed to pave the way for his escalating behavior. His neighbors described him as withdrawn and paranoid. He set traps around his home and hoarded gasoline containers in his garage, behaviors that, while odd, now seemed to foreshadow deeper issues. For Sade's family, the revelations about Anderson's past were both shocking and frustrating. Could stricter consequences for his prior actions have prevented her disappearance and death? For the community, his case highlighted the cracks in a system that allowed someone with a history of violence to remain free. While investigators built their case against him, these details added weight to the tragedy. Anderson's history was not just a backdrop, it was a reminder of missed opportunities to prevent harm. Pause for transition. Now the focus turned to justice for Sade. The evidence was mounting, but the road ahead would not be easy. Sade's death left a hole that could never be filled. For her family, friends, and community, the pain of her loss was overwhelming. She wasn't just a victim of a crime. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. Her family, who had celebrated her many accomplishments and looked forward to her bright future, was now left grappling with the unimaginable. Her mother, Sheena, described the torment of not knowing when the final pieces of Sade's remains would be found. The thought of her daughter being taken in such a violent way was already unbearable. But the inability to lay her completely to rest added another layer of grief. For her younger sister, Adriana, the loss of Sade wasn't just the loss of a sibling, but of a mentor and a confidant. But even in the depths of their sorrow, Sade's family found ways to honor her. At Milwaukee Area Technical College's graduation ceremony, Sade was awarded a posthumous honorary degree in criminal justice. Her sister Adriana accepted it on her behalf, standing before a crowd that celebrated not just Sade's academic achievements, but the person she was. Adriana said, "This is her diploma. She worked so hard to earn it. I'm glad I could be the steps she didn't have to take to receive it." Sade's family also created the Sade's Voice Foundation. Its mission is to support families of missing persons of color and raise awareness about their stories that too often go unnoticed. Through this foundation, they hope to ensure that no other family has to endure the silence and lack of resources they experienced during their search for Sade. The community's response to Sade's death was a mix of heartbreak and action. Vigils were held across Milwaukee, bringing people together to honor her life and demand justice. Her story sparked conversations about violence against women, especially women of color, and how these cases are handled by the justice system. For many, Sade's case became a call to address broader systemic issues. It highlighted the need for more robust support for families of missing persons, stricter consequences for violent offenders, and greater awareness of the unique challenges faced by women of color. Sade's family and community have vowed to keep her memory alive. Through their actions, they've turned their grief into a force for change. While nothing can bring Sade back, her story continues to inspire a commitment to justice, safety, and equity for all. Sade's impact didn't end with her passing. Her story is one of resilience, love, and the unwavering determination of a family and community to ensure her life was never forgotten. Sade Carleena Robinson's story is one that weighs heavily on the heart. It's a story that reminds us how fragile life can be and how quickly the world can change for a family, a community, and even a city. Her life was one of promise and possibility, a young woman determined to create a future for herself and give back to the world. Yet, her death has become a symbol of something greater, the need to address the gaps in justice, to better protect women of color, and to ensure that no story like hers goes unheard. Sharing her story isn't just about remembering Sade. It's about raising awareness for the countless others who are still missing or whose voices remain silenced. It's about standing with families like hers who are left to piece together shattered dreams while demanding accountability and change. If Sade's story moved you, please take a moment to reflect on how we can all contribute to making our communities safer. Share this video, not just to spread the word, but to remind others that every life matters. Support organizations like the Sade's Voice Foundation, which works tirelessly to bring attention to cases that often go unnoticed. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel to help us continue shining a light on stories like Sade's. Together, we can amplify voices, demand justice, and work toward a world where tragedies like this are less common. Sade's family continues their fight for justice, and her legacy lives on through the actions of those who loved her and the community that rallied around them. In the face of such profound loss, they've chosen to create hope. They've chosen to honor Sade by working toward change. Her life, though tragically cut short, has left an indelible mark, and her memory reminds us all that even in the darkest of times, there's a chance to make a difference, to come together, and to fight for a better future. Thank you for watching. Let's honor Sade by keeping her story alive and by standing up for justice, one voice at a time.